family echoes. What are you inheriting? Is it genes that remain dormant until they don't? Or is it behavior that you learn as a child? How do our early days in our biology determine what we carry into adulthood and what is a responsibility? And how do we know the difference? So today we welcome Cheri Petroni, who specializes in childhood trauma in adults, as well as we have Sallie Wagner, who specializes in embracing your inner shadow, and she is your personal alchemist. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got a lot to uncover here. So, generational trauma occurs in two ways. One is within your control, right? Through learned behavior or through early memories. And the other one is really out of your control. It may be in your genetics that gets awakened, or it lays dormant, or it gets awakened. When we say triggers, those can be some genetic markers that make you vulnerable or predisposed to certain conditions. Cheri, can you open our panel today?
Yes, I can. And I would say that it's usually a combination. And I would imagine that Sallie is going to agree with that, because some of it is really what happens is after 3 generations, genetically, there are things that are coded into our generational map, so to speak. So that ancestral genetic piece that does come through. Now, what happens though is, as the next generation comes along and they learned this certain way, then that continues to hold precedence, because the fact is we are, as children, trying to gather information from a very not prefrontal cortex, because that comes later on as in adulthood, but just trying to figure out what the patterns are and how to relate to them in order to stay safe, which is the key. And that's where the trauma comes into play, because it's not always in our interpretation that what we think is happening, like, oh, keep everybody happy, or let's just be strong, or don't make any mistakes, those kinds of things. Those are the patterns that later on in life give us the challenges that we have. And so it's kind of a combination, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, because you mentioned do everything perfectly, be strong. And another one is make yourself small and unheard, and, be very shy, and all of those kinds of things that, as you say, as we grow into adulthood, those things no longer serve us. And then we have some issues in how we're responding to our environment.
Yeah, what I'm fascinated by, and this came up a little bit on the personal side because I'm conducting some family research. Mm-hmm. And so I revisited a lot of things that I've forgotten, right? And some were happy, some were not. But funny enough, the areas that I purposely have tried not to go down those bunny trail, like, we're busy enough as it is. Trust me, I don't have time to go make trouble, right? Funny enough, this time that I was doing it more objectively, like through research for a paper for, Wikipedia contribution, I was able to look at it differently. I don't know if I have changed, I'm just older, or my understanding of it, my empathy of it. It just didn't seem as bad as I remembered it, right? Like, I remember it being like a source of like high anxiety. So what I want to explore for our friends in our audience is, when we say generational trauma, in my opinion, there's 2 kinds. There is the hard-coded one that we don't have control over, right? Like genetics. And then there are the ones that we construct this story around it, right? Because being theatrical in a family of, left brain people could be enough to create trauma as a child, right? Because you just don't fit in. Like, you don't fit in into your family. But is that really generational trauma, or is it just fitting in as a child, right? Like, where is like, I know it's not a hard line, but for our own peace, inner peace, and inner reconciliation, how do we discern between what's emotional and what's biological? To both of you.
I think it's difficult sometimes, right? Because we are shaped by our time, really. And I think a good example of that for me personally is, almost 100 years ago when my mother was born. It was in the mountains in Western North Carolina. And when she was a very young child, her mother and father divorced. Well, 100 years ago, in that time, in that place, that was shameful. And, now in hindsight, I can look at that and see the impacts on her. I can see the impacts on me. And now it's like, oh, that kind of makes sense now, right? And yet today, someone's divorced, we don't think a thing about it. So I think the perceived trauma can be kind of defined by our time and our place.
Cheri?
Yes. So from a provocative place, it can be both. And I was thinking of my grandmother right away. She was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic when she was in her 20s. Do I think she was paranoid schizophrenic? Absolutely not. Because she's a lot like me and a lot like my great grandmother, who I happened to be born on the same day as. And my mother did not want me to be born on that day, no matter what, even though it was predicted, because she didn't want me to be like them, because they're bohemian. They are out of the box. I see everything differently than everyone else. And I remember my grandmother being shamed because my great grandmother, she died when I was 12, but highly intuitive, and it was not liked, right? So I'm then my great grandmother, my mother, and then me. I had that piece ingrained in me to be that way. And because it was shamed all those years, so go back to the shame, because that's a really good thing. So, I mean, it's not a good thing, but a good thing to hold on to, because guess what? The buck stops here. I don't care if it's intergenerational. I don't care if it's the patterns of behavior and it's been learned over and over. It ends up being a problem in my family. Therefore, I am responsible to finding out why and how I can change this. And what's interesting is it really doesn't make a difference when we go in. I know that Sallie works with this same type of thing, and it doesn't really matter because every single person is different. And the whole thing is about bringing change so that that person can have a better life and help the family and friends around them, because we also attract people sometimes that are like us in our pain.
And that is one way that like, to me, and again, you two are really the thought leaders and specialists in this particular niche. But to me, the word generational trauma gets used very loosely, right? Like, it could just simply be inherited behavior because you're repeating the circumstances. You know what I mean? Like, if you saw abuse, or if you saw whatever you saw as a child, you will attract those people in you because that's what feels safe. And sometimes safe pain is better than unknown growth.
Yes. Right. And I think also when we experience those traumatic events, and we've talked about this as kind of the topic of today, it stops our development emotionally. And so we're kind of frozen in time at that point in our lives emotionally. And so we may be grown up, and yet there's a little child running things inside. And
You often hear, I don't know if it's more a US thing or a Canada thing or a North American thing, but you often hear men refer to themselves as men child. Like we're like, oh, he's just a man child, right? And someone is okay, it makes them playful, and the whole Peter Pan complex. But you very seldom hear women child, because that takes it a whole different dark, path. But still, we do not often think of that, which is also known as arrested development, when something occurs that causes such trauma that emotionally you kind of freeze at that point in your development. And how do we begin to recognize it in ourselves? This is not about judging others. It really, the intentionality and the awareness begins with self. If you're at a point that you're feeling restless, or whatever is happening is not bringing about peace, or you're seeing patterns repeated that you don't wish to continue.
Yeah.
Well, it's just becoming aware of the patterns. First of all, so I'll just say my husband did something really silly and infantile yesterday. And I said to him that exact thing: you are a man child, and I really don't like you when you're in this space, because it's not funny. And it's actually demeaning to me as your wife, and it's not acceptable, and I will not have this happen again. It was just a stupid thing, but it was really demeaning, and it was in front of a bunch of people. So
but he did not mean it that way.
It was not about me at all. It was about him having approval for everyone else. And it is, at 43 years of marriage, still unacceptable.
Okay.
And completely unacceptable to me, to the point it was pretty humiliating. I left completely. It was that upsetting to me. And so my point with that is I was very aware that this is not going to happen again in my life. And that is a whole other, like, that was me throwing down the gauntlet, because I'm not going to put up with that kind of stuff anymore, because we have layers of it, right? So there's things that are happening, and there's various versions of some of this same stuff. And I realized in that moment that this is completely not okay. I'm not living like this anymore. Like, I'm not living this way.
Yeah.
And that's
I find in humor, like in culturally, right? Some of that trauma, for example, in historically, right? My ex-husband is of British ancestry, and in the way they communicate is different from Latin, right? Like that's a whole different episode. Trust me, that's a whole different season, that if we go down that bunny trail. However, in Britain, from what I have experienced and have grown to know, they use the word stupid quite loosely. It doesn't carry the same weight that if a Latin person says, you're stupid, right? So every time he would say it, oh, don't be stupid, right? I know he did not mean anything deeper than, something to say at that moment, right? But for me, it was such a trigger. It was like beyond upsetting, right? And it took a long time, very early on our relationship, that I really try to explain why that was such a trigger, right? And, and jokingly, I used to say, well, I'm smarter than you. So if I'm stupid, I don't know, right? And it took several approaches for him to understand how upsetting that was. Although I know he did not mean anything by it.
Yeah.
So is that cultural trauma, would you say? Or like what would that even begin to be?
The thing that comes to mind with each of your descriptions here is we teach people how to treat us. And to back it up further, I mean, we learn how we should be treated from our parents, our family, people in our environment as we grow up. And then whatever we've learned, we teach other people that that's the way we should be treated. And so I think it's kind of that. It's and it can be traumatic, right? If we experience trauma, if we've learned trauma, then that's what we teach people about how to treat us. And most importantly, I think we teach ourselves how to treat ourselves. And so part of the change that you brought up, Carolina, is to recognize the patterns, as Cheri said, and then teach ourselves a different way to treat ourselves. And then that extends out into people in our environment.
Yeah, and have a choice strategy.
Yeah.
Right? We keep speaking about from coping to choosing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having that choice. Like, okay, so when these occur, what will I do? Because, there's a thought, and I love it, that says people don't treat you how you deserve. People treat you to the degree that you allow.
Yeah.
Right? Which, yes, it could be the generational and childhood trauma that creates the vulnerability, but the choice remains yours.
Yeah.
On how to deal with it immediately and how to deal with it long term.
And so I feel like sometimes that sounds like, to many people who are victims of some of that, well, do you see what you did? And yes, we have to help them become aware because they're not aware. But also, like, in my case, this has been not the first time that he's done something similar to this. And so I feel very proud of myself, no matter what anybody else thought of. I don't care what they think. Oh, he didn't really mean it. Do you know how demeaning that is as a secondary trauma after I actually had that happen? And then, and I'm not traumatized by it, but to then kind of throw it back at you. Well, you know what? When you know better, you do better. And if you know better and you're doing better and they're not, you get to choose to walk out, which is what I did. And everybody thought that I was the problem. And I know I wasn't. And you know what? That's the best feeling that you can have when you get to that place of awareness and knowing that I know better than this and I'm not willing to be treated this way anymore. And that's a big shift. Now, that takes a lot of years and a lot of work. And also it can happen in a split second. Like, I was absolutely mortified because, again, this was a long time thing that I hadn't had it happen in a long time. And I really could not believe that, wow, this is still where you're at. I'm not here anymore. So I have to walk out now.
So how would you, funny, because in the warm-up, Sallie and I were discussing, some material that all of us come across that is like, this is worth diving, and having a discussion about. And what we're talking about, because, is double pronged. On one hand, is about, embracing your shadow, right? And integrating your own shadow. But it's also, how do we integrate others, right? And it's that discernment of where are the boundaries, what are the choices you make, and what are the consequences to those choices. And that is, it's very easy to say, coping is a season, and most of us have learned defense mechanisms, or we have learned coping mechanisms for something that hopefully had been, temporary, right? But if it keeps recurring, then it becomes a choice, right? Once you see the pattern and you've identified the pattern and you are being intentional about it, and you keep doing it or allowing it to happen, it's really a choice that you're making. And I know it sounds harsh and it sounds as if, with all of the problems that people have in the world, really, you're going to worry about, splitting hairs in your head, right, as to what it is or what it isn't. But if it's costing you your peace of mind, it's costing you your health, it's costing you your, identity, it's worth exploring. And it's nobody's business to say whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, they used to call it navel gazing. Maybe they still do. I don't know. And I think we have, I hate to say duty, but I think we have an obligation to ourselves to do that, because we need to, I think we should be the best person we can be. We hear people, oh, just be yourself. Well, that's horrible advice. Be better. Don't go back, go better. That's what my husband and I always say. And I think that impacts our health, as you said. It impacts our emotional, physical, social, spiritual well-being. It impacts our resilience, which impacts how we relate to other people. And when we raise ourselves, we raise those around us. So I think it's really important.
Don't go back, go better.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm processing that one. We're going to come back to that one.
That's going to be the title of his book.
Yes, I love it. I love it because, Sallie, both of you are publishing with PWT a series of micro books so that you are able to process them, so that, the content doesn't get lost in filler words, right? So Cheri, so now this occurred, you took action, right? What happens now?
So that is going to be a process, obviously, because now he gets the opportunity to do something different, right? And I'm not saying what that's going to be, because it might be that I'm just finished and I'm dead serious in this. I am dead serious. Like, I don't care anymore about, which is not a good place to be in a sense, but it is actually when you're done, like having I have been disrespected my entire life from every person practically, which is part of that generational thing. If I go back to my grandparents and my great-grandparents and shamed even within the family because of who my grandmother was. And so we would get broken gifts as children at Christmas, where the other kids would get really nice things and we'd get a 50-cent, like a dollar store at the time, but gift, like earrings that were broken in pieces that somebody tore apart to just let me know that's what I was worth. Like things like that were very, very painful. Now, people will tell me now, oh, well, you just need to, you can't go back. Well, I'm not going back, really. I'm just explaining these were some of the things that gave me this that I didn't realize was happening until it was happening. And so now that something has come back from a while ago, and I'm not that person anymore, there'll be a discussion. And he's going to have to go get some help or something, because I can only do so much. And then there's the point where I'm not willing to keep carrying the burden, because I'm not the one that caused the problem. It was a very weird thing. Like, it was just out of the blue. And I will tell you one thing that's going to be an interesting point. Usually if he does something like this, I have something like a podcast the next day, or an event, or a presentation, or something really, really important, a job interview, I'll say, or something. So there's more to it, but it's not mine to unpack. So I am aware, and I've noticed, and I removed myself because I didn't want to be frazzled today. And of course, there's still that emotion there, because I was like, wow, why?
Recognizing
we're
those
60s,
patterns.
This? Yeah, it's a pattern that he has not addressed.
You know what? This is, again, I'm a huge, Marcus Aurelius fan. And the whole journaling, I live and die by it, is writing down. Now, I have learned a little bit more, because before I used to only journal when something bad happened or I was upset. So if you were ever to, not that you write it performatively for anyone else, but if anybody else were to pick it up, it's like, oh my word, how's this woman still alive, right? It's only bad things that happen to her. It's like, no, it just happens that that's the only time that I needed the time to reflect. So now I do try to reflect on all of it, right? Not just the bad. But I think it's really important when it happens to go back and to see if you are able to spot a pattern in yourself and in others, right? So Sallie, how would we begin to embrace our shadow in others' shadow? And this is going to be with a light brush, because it's a topic that we really need to come back to it, right? What can be done?
I think it's, we were discussing this pre-show, for ourselves, obviously it's based on what I do. There's a lot of integration that we do, because a lot of the stuff that's in shadow may not be bad, based on what Cheri was just saying about her family. There's a lot of good there that was deemed to be not acceptable, but there were good things, right? I think women, we get told, don't be powerful, don't be assertive, don't be creative, don't be this, don't be that. And those are all good things. And then we put them into shadow because they weren't acceptable. And we were told that it was bad. So integration for ourselves. And then as we talked about for others, I mean, we don't know exactly what their shadow is. We can't read their minds. We don't live their lives. We can only look at their behaviors and what we deem to be patterns. And I mentioned it's a lot of, and, as I'm doing this for myself, just releasing the outcome. So they have their own shadow to deal with and however they choose. And I'm not going to be tied into what that outcome is. And maybe it is walking away. Maybe it's changing the environment. It's a lot of things to keep ourselves safe and sane. And also giving them the grace to live out what they need to live out.
Yeah. So in building on what Sallie just said, because I think that's extremely powerful, is the reconciliation of it all, right? From a place of inquiry. So asking someone, this occurred, calmer, right? Like after the fact, this occurred, and I am curious as to what you were thinking, right? Like tell me what you were looking at. Tell me what you were thinking, without you even saying the effect that it had on you, but just, and this is if it's a person that is close to you, right? I'm not speaking of, people that leave silly comments on our work online, as where, we live a very public life, right? Because I don't understand what makes people think they're okay to just comment left, right, and center on, on things that have nothing to do with the price of bread. But anyways, I think going at it from a place of inquiry, because it's happened before. So I think in the process of highlighting it and bringing it to their attention and intention gives you more information in order for you to choose what you would like to see or what direction you would like to take from it. And that takes, incredible discipline to be able to have a conversation of inquiry. That's what comes to mind for me. And I think in the process of asking it, it informs them a lot about the impact that because behavior is a language. So what were you trying to say with your words and actions? Right? That would be my next processing on that. Interesting.
And I think you said the magic word, choose. We've said that a lot. It's a choice for us when we reclaim that power. it's the power of the choice.
That's right.
Yeah, and it takes multiple steps. I mean, just
Yes.
being aware sometimes isn't even possible. They know something's not okay, and there's a whole lot of other things that need to be unpacked before they can see that, oh, this does not work for me. And then it's starting the understanding and the conversation, which doesn't always go in a way that there's resolve.
Well, you can control it, right?
Yeah,
All you can do is process it.
Yeah.
So that is brilliant. Oh my goodness. So this was Family Echoes, healing and reconciling generational and childhood trauma. And one of many conversations to come on the topic. So thank you, ladies. And we'll put your contact information, and let's all reflect on when something triggers us, just investigate it instead of attaching the feeling and the trauma and the disrespect and the emotion and whatever is so easy to link to it, right? From a neuroscience, but also our peace and our well-being. Do the work of inquiry, and is truly transformational. And of course, you can reach out to all of us for any questions or any guidance that you may have. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, thank you, Cheri. Thank you, Sallie.
Thank you.
Bye.